All right, whoever is not in their seat in 6 seconds will be standing in front of the group and reciting the syllogism from memory. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Dutch woman is running like crazy to get to her seat. She made it. All right. Since all of you obeyed, let's do the syllogism review. Premise 1. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Premise 2. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Conclusion? Therefore, abortion is wrong. Do we have clarity with that syllogism? Yes, we do. Now, it could be we're wrong, but they're going to have to show we're wrong. It won't be enough to dismiss our case. We are coming back to this syllogism again and again and again until you're so sick of me doing it that you're going to wish I'd get on my plane, go to Heathrow, and get out of here. You're so tired of hearing this. But it's what's going to save the day for you when you're talking with people who constantly want to throw you off message. You're going to continually come back to that syllogism and ask yourself this question: does anything they just said to me refute that syllogism? And if the answer is no, they're throwing a red herring at you. That's all they're doing, is trying to distract you rather than actually do the hard work of refuting you. It's one thing to distract someone, it's quite another to actually refute the argument they're making. All right, let's look at some other scientific objections to the pro-life view, or alleged scientific objections. We looked at miscarriage. The fact that there's a high number of miscarriages does not A, demonstrate the embryos in question are not human, or B, indicate that we may intentionally kill them. We also looked at the fact that even though some women don't grieve miscarriages the way that they grieve the death of an infant or older child, that even if that's true, that doesn't change the nature of the unborn. My feelings about something don't change what it is. We also looked at twinning. The fact that that embryo can split into two does not mean it wasn't a whole living entity prior to the split. And what example did I give you to help illustrate that? Anybody remember? Flatworm. By the way, in the States, a flatworm is the most boring, dull person you've ever met. There is actually, though, a biological organism known as a flatworm. We have them in the South. And if you do cut them in half, you get two, not one. Here are some other objections. Sperm and egg are alive. So how can you say that that embryo is alive and unique when sperm and egg are also alive? Does that mean that every time a man uses a condom, he commits mass murder because sperm and egg can't join together? I mean, yada, yada, yada. We've all heard this, have we not? Okay, this objection confuses parts with wholes. Sperm and egg are parts of larger living human entities. They are not whole, distinct living entities the way you were when you were an embryo. Remember when I had you a few moments ago pinch yourself and pull a bunch of hand cells off the back of your hand? Why did I do that? To illustrate the difference between parts and wholes. These skin cells are parts of larger human beings, you. They are not whole living embryos the way you were back at that stage. The same is true with sperm and egg. And by the way, while we're at it, we need to correct our language here. There's no such thing as a fertilized egg. Have you heard our opponents say, well, you're saying that fertilized egg should have the same rights as a fully formed woman? Here's the problem with that, just from a strictly scientific point of view. Sperm and egg do what in the act of fertilization? Does anybody know? What happens to them? They die. Sperm and egg die in the act of fertilization. They surrender their constituents into the makeup of a new living entity. Therefore, to say that that embryo is a fertilized egg is a misnomer. It shows your opponent doesn't know what he's talking about. Because sperm and egg die in the act of conception. They don't go on to exist as a fertilized egg. No, they surrender their parts into the makeup of a new human being, a new biological entity. Another objection you'll get, you'll hear that embryos are just clumps of cells. All right, a morbid example here, but I think it will illustrate the point. Suppose that through those doors in the back, a physician were to wheel in a corpse that's been dead one day. Would there be living cells on the corpse? Lots of them. Lots of them. You have living cells. The corpse has living cells. How come the corpse is dead and you're not? Here's why. Although you both have cells, in the corpse, the cells are no longer talking to each other. There's been an irreversible cessation of the body's ability to function as a coordinated whole. Question: has the embryo suffered that kind of loss? It's true an embryo doesn't have a brain, but guess what? When you were an embryo, you didn't need a brain to live. Something else coordinated your bodily systems so that you functioned as a coordinated, living, biological entity. Unlike the corpse that has suffered an irreversible loss of the capacity to function as a coordinated entity, the embryo from the earliest stages of development has suffered no such loss. The embryo is in the category of not yet needing a brain, not in the category of no more functioning as a coordinated whole. Is everybody clear on this distinction? You will hear very intelligent people claim that because the embryo does not have a brain, it's not yet a living organism. They're not even arguing the value question. They're not arguing, well, it doesn't have a brain and you don't have value till you have a brain. No, they're claiming it's not even a living organism yet. That is false for the simple reason that an early human embryo does not need a brain to live. You do. What coordinates your bodily systems right now as a mature human being? What coordinates it? Your brain does. It doesn't follow you had to have a brain to do that at the embryonic stage. Embryos don't need brains to coordinate their bodily systems. You do. It doesn't follow that because the embryo doesn't have the brain, that it's therefore not one of us. Another objection you'll get. You'll be told that molar pregnancies can follow from conception, and that because there are molar pregnancies, we should not claim the early embryo is a human being. Here's a molar pregnancy. Instead of an embryo emerging, we get a mass of tissue and hair and bone, but it's clearly a malfunction conception. And the argument goes that because molar pregnancies can ensue, that it's foolish to say the early embryo is a distinct living whole human being. Here's the problem with this. Molar pregnancies do not start off as embryos and morph into something else. They never were full human conceptions. How many of you know the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? How many of you know the alphabet song? Same tune, isn't it? Sort of? Some of you, who wants to sing it for us? Who's going to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Anybody here from another planet that wants to do that? I'm not. Okay, go. All right. Well, think it in your head, all right? Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now think about the alphabet song. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Okay, they sound the same, don't they? You didn't know we were going to do nursery rhymes in this course, did you? What'd you learn today about Mabel? We sung nursery rhymes, Henry. Now, question. Are Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and the alphabet song the same tunes? They're not the same tune. You're actually wrong, and I'm going to show you why you're wrong. All right? You're right, they start off the same way, but in the fifth measure, they depart. They never were the same song, though they sound like it at the beginning, correct? Molar pregnancies never were full human embryos, though some people think they look like that early on. They never were. Molar pregnancies, or what some would call tumor pregnancies, are incomplete fertilizations. They never were fully functioning embryos. They're not coordinated in their bodily systems the way you were at the embryonic stage. So for them to say to us that these molar pregnancies refute our argument that the unborn are distinct, living, whole human beings is just plain false on the face of it. Somebody's not doing their homework on embryology. Another objection you'll get, and by the way, all these are in your notes. The burning research lab. Oh my. This is a fun one. Here's the argument. The abortion choice advocate comes to you and says, you know what, pro-lifer? Even you don't believe your own rhetoric. You're essentially lying because you don't believe that embryo is a complete living whole human being, and I'm going to demonstrate you don't believe that. You're in a burning research lab. The building is an inferno. In that corner back there is a newborn baby. In this corner up here is a vial full of frozen embryos. Who are you going to save? You only got time to save either the newborn or the embryos. Where are we all going? We're all going to the newborn. And our critic says, see, even you don't believe your own rhetoric, because if you did, you would consider saving the embryos. Are you stumped? It's okay if you are, by the way. I'm going to play some games here. And by the way, one of the things I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to actually role play being a pro-abortion activist. And I'm going to argue their case better than they argue their case and give you a chance to refute me, all right? We're going to have some fun. I'm going to go out and buy an Ann Ferretti mask while I'm, no. All right. Okay, we got a burning research lab. Corner, which one you choose? Why does that not refute the pro-life view? Does anybody want to take a shot at it?
Because how I'm human and how I feel doesn't determine what's right and wrong. And I know that I have to make a choice. So I make it.
So my feelings about something don't determine what it is, and the fact that I choose to save one over the other doesn't have any normative judgment on the one I leave behind. Okay, fair.
The newborn is more capable of surviving than the others, so you do triage.
Triage, sure, absolutely. Both good answers. Okay, question. This building is on fire. It's an inferno. I have a choice of saving all of you or my 14-year-old daughter, Emily Rose. Who is going to fry? I will not shoot you on the way out, but I'm saving her first. Why? Because I'm her dad and I have responsibilities to her I don't have to you. So I'm going to save her first. Does it follow you're less human than she is because I save her first? Let's go back to our 3 key words. What are they? I'll give you a hint. If you get the first one right, the other 2 generally follow right along. Let's do it again, folks. Come on. Syllogism, syllogism, syllogism. What is that syllogism? Premise 1? Intentionally kill an innocent human being. Premise 2? Intentionally kills an innocent human being. 3? Therefore, abortion's wrong. Does the fact you save the newborn first refute that syllogism? At best, it shows what? You're inconsistent in the way you apply your ethic. I don't think you are, but at best, that's what it would show. It would not show you're wrong about the unborn being fully human. By the way, that's what we call an ad hominem attack, where you attack the person rather than the actual argument they're making, a point we're going to come back to before we're done here today. So these kinds of scientific objections never really get to the heart of refuting the pro-life syllogism. Instead, what they do is they simply confuse the matter. Now, I want to cover one more, and again, this is where pictures can really help us, but not always. The argument goes like this: that early embryo doesn't look like one of us. And can we be honest for a moment? I mean, okay, can we at least admit as pro-lifers that if you saw a microscopic image of an early embryo that appears to just be a ball of 12 cells, that your intuitions don't immediately go, that's me? Can we be honest about that? That it is a bit of a, it seems like a stretch. I think, though, we can help people reorient their intuitions with a few examples. Anybody here remember Polaroid cameras? Everybody over 50 is nodding. For those of you youngsters in the room, allow me to tell you what they were. Polaroid cameras, I'm tempted to say, were invented by Satan, but they were these rather plastic, oblong, very unattractive looking plastic devices where you would shoot a picture. And for those of you that don't even know what the pre-digital era was, what it was an error. What it was is that an analog camera? She has got one. Can I encourage you to hang on to that? It's probably worth mucho antique bucks. There used to be these things called film that you would slap into one of those cameras, and you would snap a picture, and you would take your pictures over to Boots Pharmacy, and you'd wait a month for the pictures to be developed, and they'd come back, half of them overexposed. Remember those days? Yeah. All right. Polaroid cameras came along, and you didn't have to wait for your picture. You shot the picture, the camera would spit out a white piece of paper covered in brown, and you'd just wait. And 2 minutes later or so, your picture would emerge. Voila, there it is. Pretend we are in the pre-digital era. You are on a Mexican safari. You have a Polaroid camera. You might just have one if you've got one of those. I could draw all kinds of conclusions about your life based on your camera. You're on a safari. You've got your Polaroid camera, and you just happen to snap a picture of a black jaguar jumping across the trail in front of us. Do you know how rare it is that black jaguars are photographed? Almost never. You got it. And while you're waiting for that picture to emerge, I come up to you, I rip the camera out of your hand, I rip out the paper, and I tear it up. Are you going to be ticked at me? That's an American word for angry. You going to be angry at me? Oh yeah. What if I said this? Jaguar? What's the big deal? There's no jaguar there. That's just a white piece of paper with a brown smudge on it. Would that satisfy you? You know what you'd say to me? You'd look at me with your lips quivering, your eyes ablaze, and you would look at me and you would say, brown smudge on a piece of paper? Are you out of your mind? The jaguar in the picture was already there. We just couldn't see him yet. Men and women, from the very beginning, you were already there. We just couldn't see you. That's what the science of embryology tells us. Richard Stith gives another example. That jaguar example is his too, by the way. He says, imagine you go to your favorite uncle's home, and you walk in, and there on the dining room table, there's a photograph of what appears to be a group of 12 cells. And you say, Uncle Bill, what's that? He goes, well, that's me when I was an embryo. Well, you would immediately connect Uncle Bill with that embryo, wouldn't you? You'd say something like, well, gee, Uncle Bill, you aren't any better looking then than you are now. I mean, you know, those kinds of things would immediately come to your mind. You'd connect him with the embryo, with the adult he is today. And I think part of what our job is as pro-life advocates is to help reawaken people's intuitions so that they can start to see the humanity of the embryo even before pictures can start to take an effect showing them the awfulness of abortion. All right. What I want to do now is make a philosophic case for the pro-life view, and then we're going to take a break. Science tells us the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. But science has limitations. What are some limitations of science? Can anybody think of any? It's what? It's developing itself, okay. What are some other limitations?
Science is limited to things that can be done under controlled observation and experiments. So, controlled conditions, you've got to repeat the experiments, and then you test a hypothesis against observed data. And you can do that in physical sciences. You can do that to a certain extent in social sciences as well, but not under controlled conditions.
Peter?
You can't tell us what's right and wrong.
Yeah. Can science tell you you should not go home from the Clarkson Academy this afternoon and kick your cat across the living room? Some of you are going, I don't know, what's wrong with that? No. You ever see those cat haters calendars they used to publish? Do they still make those anymore? I haven't seen one in a while. All right. Science can tell us what your cat is. Science cannot tell us how to treat your cat. Science can tell me you're a human being, Peter, but it can't tell me how to treat you. Science can tell me the embryo is a human being. Science can't tell me how to treat the embryo. Our culture today is obsessed with science in this sense. It thinks that the only knowledge that's real and knowable is the hard science knowledge. But there's a lot of things we know to be true that aren't scientific. By the way, the claim science is the only truth, is that a scientific statement? No, it's a philosophic statement about science, right? It's literally self-refuting. When we say that the unborn have value like you and I, we are no longer talking science, we're talking philosophy. So let's talk philosophy. We've already defended our case using science to show that the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. Now let's argue that they have the same value you and I do. All right? I want everybody in this room to stare at a few other people. Just go ahead, stare around the room. Look around the room. I don't know if there's any single guys here, but if there are and there's a good-looking girl, now's your chance to take a peek. A sanctified peek around the room. All right? All right, look around the room. Everybody stare. All right, question. What makes us equal? Created in God's image, all right. Our humanity. What else?
We're persons.
We're persons? What's that? We're alive? Somebody once said, we all have belly buttons. Anybody else? We're all made the same way? I heard another one over here. Okay, we're all distinctly human? Were you raising your, you were pointing to her. So you were trying to get responsibility off of you onto her. Okay, that's fair. All right. Now, go ahead.
Politics sometimes decides who's equal.
Politics decides who's equal. Yeah, you're right, it does. What's the problem with that, though? The same political system that gives you rights can do what? Take them away. So what makes us equal? Can it be something physical? Are we all equally physically capable in this room of being good athletes? I am now 55 years old. That means I now qualify for the senior citizen discount at most restaurants in the US and Canada. A benefit I refuse to partake of. I am in abject denial. I will tell you that at 55 years of age, I can still shoot a basketball as well as I did at age 21. I have a problem though. I'm not quick enough to get open to get the shot off because I'm old and slow now. I am not equal to my former self physically. Are we all equally self-aware in this room? We're not. Some of you, I saw you during the break. You were chugging the coffee back there at such an extreme level, we're going to be peeling you off the ceiling by the second break. All right? You're loaded with caffeine. You are so self-aware right now, you could handle a treatise on astrophysics and do just fine with it. Others of you, you didn't get your shot of coffee this morning. You went for that English tea stuff, which tastes better but doesn't have the potency of the caffeine, and your self-awareness level is less. If self-awareness is what gives us value, and we don't share it equally, do we have true human equality? We do not. How about the ability to feel pain? Do we all have the same equal ability to feel pain? No. How about intellectual ability? Are we all intellectually the same? No. So if human rights are based on things like self-awareness, intellectual ability, physical ability, or the ability to feel pain, all of which come and go in the course of our lifetimes, and none of us share equally, what happens to equal human rights? They are what? A fiction. Listen to me very carefully. The Christian worldview, and in particular the pro-life worldview, can account for human equality. Is our culture obsessed with equality right now? I don't care if you live in the US, the UK, Germany, France, Canada, anywhere in the Western world. The obsession right now is equality, marriage equality, income equality, social equality, right? Everywhere you look. You know what the problem is? The secular culture can't account for equality. Here's their view of equality. It's actually savage inequality. You and I, according to the leftist view, the pro-abortion view, is that we are not equal because we're all human. We're only valuable and equal to the extent we can immediately exercise a chosen function, like self-awareness, the ability to feel pain, consciousness, intellectual ability, ability to interact with one's environment, and so on. The problem with that view is none of us share those things equally, which means their view of human equality is groundless. What makes us all equal in this room? Here's our answer. We're all equal because we share the same human nature. When did you get that human nature, men and women? The moment you began to exist. When did you begin to exist? Fertilization. We can account for human equality. We are all equally invaluable. Here's why. Having a human nature is not a degreed thing like having self-awareness. Self-awareness comes in degrees. By the way, a doctor can make you more or less self-aware with a couple of pills. You know, I've had some gout issues over the last year, and I've taken some pretty potent pain medication. I can tell you right now, my self-awareness can swing pretty wildly. You should see me teach when I'm under pain meds. No, just kidding. Go ahead. What's that? That's correct. No, they're dead. They're a dead human. No, they're not a living human being, though. They're no longer one of us. The equality question is moot. The corpse is a human corpse, but it's not a living human being. It is in the category of no more. That corpse has no rights because rights don't apply to corpses, other than maybe legal rights that their wishes were expressed to be a certain way before death. But saying that the corpse is a human corpse is not putting it in the same category as a living human organism. Yes? Yeah, I was just coming to that. Thank you for asking. And that means your caffeine is doing quite well because you're thinking ahead of me. You're more of a person than half the people in this room right now. All right. What do we mean by human nature? I'm so glad you asked. It's what makes you a human being and not a cat. Human parents produce human offspring, biogenesis. Your human nature is what orders your capabilities and your functions such that you are a human being and not something else. And that human nature is immaterial. It's not something physical. For example, I won't ask your age. Well, I'll ask my age. I was born in 1960. Do I have the same body today I had in 1960? What has happened to my body over the course of the decades? Besides declining, some of you are going, but what has happened? What has happened to every cell in my body? It's been replaced multiple times, right? Listen up. If I am merely something physical and my physical parts have changed completely, am I the same being I was back then? I'm not. So what grounds my identity through time and change such that I can say I'm still me even though my physical parts and properties change? It's that I have an immaterial nature, a human nature, that makes me human, not something else. J.P. Moreland, the Christopher philosopher, calls our human nature the DNA driver. It's what makes us what we are as human beings. Now, this sounds a little bit abstract. I'm going to unpack this a little more this afternoon and tomorrow. But do you get the sense that a human nature is the only way to posit that we're the same being today as we are back then? Because if we're merely physical and our physical parts change, I'm no longer me. To give you an example, I have a 66 Mustang. It's a Ford Mustang. I don't know. There is actually a Mustang club over here in London. I intend to contact them, and I want to get one of their jackets. They've got these Ford Mustang London jackets. They look really cool. But I drive a 66 Ford Mustang as my hobby car. That car was built, rolled off the assembly line in 1965, fall of 1965. Many of the parts on that car were not on that car when it rolled off the assembly line in 1965. It's had tires changed, spark plugs changed, the oil's been changed, it's been tuned up, the brakes have been changed. In what sense then is it the same car? And the answer is it's not technically the same car that rolled off the assembly line because its parts have changed. You could lose an arm and you're still you. In fact, any physical change to your body that doesn't kill you, you remain yourself through that change, right? How so, though, if you are merely physical? So when we say the unborn has a human nature like ours and that our human nature grounds our equality, we are giving a better explanation for human value than our secular counterparts because we can account for human equality. We can say we're all equal because we have the same human nature. And you don't get a human nature in degrees. You either have it or you don't. Yes?
I absolutely agree with you in that, we have a soul and then therefore we have an immaterial part,
Yeah.
which I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
But can I just come back, because I think somebody could object to your argument, so I just want to see what you say.
Sure.
They could say, well, we could say the same thing about a cow.
About who?
About a cow, an animal.
A dog, a tree.
Yeah.
They have souls. Your dog has a soul. Your tree does too. And no, I haven't been smoking something that's leafy. And I'm going, yeah, talking about trees, I know what you're doing. At the pot. Anyway, I'm sorry. To be blunt, no, I'm sorry. Okay, now, your dog has a soul. Your dog has an immaterial nature or essence that makes it a dog and not a cat or a raccoon, that orders its properties. A dog that loses a leg is still a dog by nature. A dog that never learns to bark is still a dog by nature, even though it never realizes its ultimate capacities. The unborn human is a human by nature, even if he or she can't currently function with its ultimate capacities. Your dog has an immaterial essence. I didn't say your dog had an eternal soul. I don't know. And I will say your dog does not have a soul that bears the image of God the way that humans do. I'm not saying all souls are equal. I am saying the Christian worldview argues that living things have souls, meaning immaterial essences that ground identity through time and change. In other words, I'll bite the bullet. I'll go ahead and give your critic that. Yeah, your dog does have a soul. So does the cow. Just not a human one. Just not one that bears the image of God. Have I sold you, Pastor?
You haven't fully, because I think I would say the dog is a species.
But so are humans.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the Christian worldview does teach that animals have souls, because when they die, they die.
I didn't say they had eternal souls. I just mean there's something to them that is beyond mere physical properties. Because if a dog is merely physical, if he loses a leg, he's not the same dog. Something has to ground his identity through time and change. That's all I'm saying. I'm using soul in a very generic sense here. Yeah. Ponder that for a moment while your brain cells are changing, and let me know what you think. You guys didn't know philosophy could be fun, did you? We're going to get deep into metaphysics this afternoon after lunch when all the endorphins have crashed to your feet. No. All right. All right. Where was I before we got into the radical question you brought up about souls, and you brought up about cows? Back to the issue of what grounds our identity? Simply this: we all have the same human nature. Now, before we break for lunch, which we're going to do here in just about 10 minutes, I want to give you a way to argue that the unborn from the embryonic stage do not differ substantially from you, the adult, in a way that justifies killing them at that earlier stage of development. Suppose you're talking to a person who's not Christian, doesn't accept the Bible. Now, several of you made the case. You said, well, we're all equal because we all bear the image of God. I completely agree with that. But is that going to work in Parliament Square when you're standing in front of the signs? No. If Richard Dawkins walks by, is he going to buy that argument? No. So how can we engage someone? Here's how. We're going to demonstrate there's no essential difference between you, the embryo, and you, the adult, that would justify killing you back then. That's going to be our philosophic case. And when we look at this, what we find out is that there are 4 differences between you, the embryo, and you, the adult. Stephen Schwartz has suggested the acronym SLED as a way to remember these 4 differences. There's a difference of size, a difference of level of development, a difference of environment, meaning where we are, and a difference of degree of dependency. Think of the acronym SLED. You'll remember these 4 differences. Size. Were you smaller as an embryo? Since when does body size determine value? Are men generally larger than women? Do men deserve more rights, ladies, than you do, simply because we tend to be bigger? This guy's nodding yes. I thought I'd point him out to you, ladies. Right here. No. A 7'2" athlete is not more human and valuable than all of us because he's a foot taller than everyone in the room. How about level of development? Were you less developed as an embryo than you are today? But why does that matter? Folks, can I pause for a second? We have got to become better at asking people why it matters that they're asserting certain things are important. Well, the embryo isn't self-aware. You know what your answer should be immediately? So, why does that matter in the first place? Make them argue for it. I'm going to say more about this in my next session. Make them argue for it. Size, level of development. Is a 2-year-old girl less developed than a 20-year-old young woman? Yes? Does the 2-year-old have less rights? What's that? Another 45. Another half an hour. So you just changed my speaking slot. Is it the same speaking slot it was now that it's undergone change? You know, that is a very scary thing to tell a speaker you're increasing his time when he's in the middle of speaking. I'm going to do this. I will go a little bit longer, but not that long. And we will break for lunch probably in about 10 minutes, if that's okay. Because I'll wrap this up and then we'll come back. All right. Level of development. You were less developed as an embryo than you are today, but why does that matter? A 2-year-old girl is less developed than a 20-year-old young woman. Does the 2-year-old does she have less of a right to life? My speaking team and I at LTI, we speak in high schools all over the US and Canada. And it's not uncommon for us to speak in front of an audience of 1,400 high school students. They're all up in the bleachers in the gymnasium. And I'll sometimes say to these students, you are less developed than your parents. You are less developed than your parents physically, and you are less developed than your parents intellectually, which comes as a complete shock to most of them. But you don't reach your intellectual peak until your mid-40s, correct? Does it follow your parents have a greater right to life than you simply because they're more developed? William Wilberforce laid a foundation for the argument against slavery here in the UK that was copied and borrowed by Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. And borrowing on the thinking of Wilberforce and Clarkson and others, Lincoln made a rather apt observation. When he would debate against slavery, he would make his opponents notice that there was no essential difference between the slave and the white man that wouldn't also enslave the white man. And I'm going to quote Lincoln here almost word for word. He got this studying Wilberforce. Listen to his quote. You say man A is white, man B is dark. Oh, it is skin color then? The fair-skinned man having the right to enslave the dark-skinned man? Take care. By that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with skin fairer than your own. You say it's not skin color, it's a matter of intellect. The white man, you allege, is superior intellectually to the dark man? Take care. By that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with an intellect superior to your own. You say it is not skin color, it is not intellect, it's interest. The white man, you allege, has it in his interest to enslave the dark man. Take care again. By that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet who can make it his interest to enslave you, end quote. Do you see what Lincoln just did there? Any argument used to disqualify that black man as one of us, Lincoln says, guess what? It works equally well for whites. Any argument I know for disqualifying the fetus as fully human works real well to disqualify newborns. This is Peter Singer's argument, is it not? You know who Peter Singer is? The Australian philosopher teaching at Princeton University now. Here's Singer's argument. Fetus is not self-aware, newborn is not self-aware, you can kill both. And Singer goes on to say, hey, pro-choicers, you can't draw an arbitrary line at birth and save the newborn while you kill the fetus, because the same argument that justifies killing the fetus works for the newborn. At least he's consistent, right? Size, level of development. How about environment, where you're located? You were in the womb, now you're out. Okay, let's see a show of hands. How many of you traveled at least 50 miles to get here today? I did. Is Oxford 50 miles away? I think it is, almost. All right. You left your home 50 miles away. You didn't stop being you because you changed location. If that's true, how does a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly transform you from a non-human, non-valuable thing we can kill to a valuable human being that we can't? Answer, if you weren't already human and valuable, you're not getting there by changing your address. And finally, degree of dependency. How does dependency on another human being mean that we can kill you? I live in the town of Noonan, Georgia. You've never heard of Noonan, Georgia. It's outside Atlanta. But we are actually quite famous because a lot of movies are now shot in Noonan. And the latest thing that's shot is a television series that is widely popular on the other side of the pond. I don't know if it's made its way over here yet, but it's a show called The Walking Dead. Have any of you heard of The Walking Dead? Do we have any Walking Dead fans here? All right, I'm one of them. Okay, you're still saved, don't worry about it. Now, for those of you that are not Walking Dead fans, it's a zombie series, and I want to warn you, it's incredibly gory. A zombie virus has broken out, and the only way you can kill the walkers, the zombies, is literally to put a pickaxe through their heads. Kind of gives a new twist on picking someone's brain. But anyway, sorry, that's bad. I got to keep you guys awake. It's afternoon. But moving right along, she thought that was funny. The hero of the show is a sheriff named Rick Grimes. And before the zombie apocalypse breaks out, he and his buddy are out on a run and they encounter some criminals who've stolen a car and they get in a gun battle with them. And Rick gets hit. And he goes into the hospital and he's in a coma. And while he's in the hospital in the coma, the zombie apocalypse breaks out. And season 1 is about how he wakes up in the hospital all alone, has to try to figure out what has happened and go find his family. Let's change the story. While Rick's in that hospital, one doctor stays behind to care for him. Rick depends totally on him for survival. Would it be okay for that doctor to kill Rick because Rick depends totally on him for survival? Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency, think SLED. Those are the only 4 differences between the embryo you were and the adults you are today, and none of those are good reasons for saying we could kill you then but not now. So now let's recap before we go to lunch. Let's go back to that 1-minute definition. Remember that 1-minute soundbite that one of you timed me at 35, was that you? Okay, 35 seconds. Do you see now where I got that? The science of embryology tells us that each of us from the very beginning was a distinct, living, whole human being. We weren't part of another human being like skin cells on the back of our hands. We were ourselves distinct, whole members of the human family. And there's no essential difference between that embryo we were and the adult we are today that justifies killing us back then. Differences of size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency are not good reasons for saying we could be killed then but not now. Now you see where I got this, right? That's our case. We are going to spend the remaining sessions that I get with you. I think my next one's tomorrow, I'm not sure. But whenever it is, we are going to spend my remaining time going through the 5 bad ways people are going to try to challenge that case we've just gone through. And we are going to look at, among other things, people who confuse functioning as a human with being a human. And we are going to demonstrate even more that the pro-life case can make the foundation for human equality our culture craves. My friend John Stonestreet, he's the president of the Colson Center and fellow Summit faculty member, says that one of the ways we're going to win this culture is we need to tell better stories. We need to do a better job of telling a winsome story. And we can tell a better story of equality than our counterparts can. That should give us confidence. Okay, we're going to break for lunch. I'll turn it over to you, Catherine, and I'll see you guys eventually at some point when the next session is.
Thank you very much.